welcome to Race of Men. I hope you're doing well this Tuesday afternoon, if it is Tuesday for you at this viewing time. Today will be the first in a series entitled Tuesday Afternoon Tea. Now, what I'll be doing in this series is reading good literature, mostly English literature, and also drinking tea at the same time. I'm relatively new to the scene when it comes to tea drinking, and I figured I might as well make my footprint here on the interwebs and see if I can get this hobby up and running. Now, being a resident of Virginia, which is known as the first permanent English settlement in North America, I'm a proud part Englishman. I have a lot of English and Welsh and Scottish lineage. Now, even though tea and tobacco did not originate from the British Isles, they imported it from their empire, and one might say even perfected the art of drinking tea or smoking a pipe or cigar. So, I recently for Christmas received a box of teas. I told some loved ones that I would like to get into tea drinking, and so I got this one. I don't know if it's good quality or not. It's called Tea Forte, and this collection here is World of Teas, so they have everything from Bombay Chai or Kai, I don't even know how to pronounce that properly, Moroccan Mint, African Solstice, Sencha, and Estate Darjeeling. Now you have black, green, and herbal teas. I've been through all of the Estate Darjeeling teas, and those are pretty good, but they were rather weak. I wasn't drinking them with sugar or anything, kind of like how you would drink black coffee. And it could have been the water to tea ratio. It could just be something that I'm not doing properly with infusing it. I do have this infuser. It's been sitting here for a little while, for the past couple minutes. And you really just pack the tea in there and close it shut, and then you put it in, and you just wait a couple minutes, and the tea infuses into hot water that you put in there. Now, after having gone through all of the Estate Darjeeling teas, those were a black tea. I'm a little bit afraid to move beyond black tea. I never really cared for green or herbal teas, but that was a long time ago since I've had green tea. So I'll try that at some point in the future, but for now I'm just going to move on to the other black tea that is given in this package. It's called the Bombay Chai. It is a black tea and has a sort of cinnamony essence to it. The Estate Darjeeling was very leafy when I had to pack it into the infuser, but this one is very much like almost like ground nuts and spices. Smells very much like cinnamon. And it does smell very good as it's infusing. So we'll try that in a minute. But what I would like to read to you is just a couple excerpts from G.K. Chesterton, The Everlasting Man. And he has come to be one of my favorite authors recently. I don't like to compare him to C.S. Lewis. I'm sure many make that comparison. I'm sure a lot of say he's the Catholic C.S. Lewis. He's not exactly like C.S. Lewis. I mean, he's a part of the similar time period as far as the English Christian literature goes, but he very much has his own unique writing style. It's more complex. He has a good harness over the words he's chosen to use. So I was reading a little bit in The Everlasting Man, and something that stood out to me was his viewpoint on chivalry and the knight, the rise of the knight. How the rise of the knight is inextricably linked to the rise of how the man views the horse, or the rise of even civilization and epics themselves. So the knight is not just a construct of the medieval era, you might say, but almost a continuation, a refinement. So I would like to read to you from his introduction, where he talks about the man and the horse, or really the man seeing the horse for the first time. George Wyndham once told me that he had seen one of the very first airplanes rise for the first time, and it was very wonderful, but not so wonderful as a horse allowing a man to ride on him. Somebody else has said that a fine man on a fine horse is the noblest bodily object in the world. Now, so long as people feel this is in the right way, all is well. The first and best way of appreciating it is to come of people with a tradition of treating animals properly, of men in the right relation to horses. A boy who remembers his father who rode a horse, who rode it well and treated it well, will know that the relation can be satisfactory and will be satisfied. He will be all the more indignant at the ill treatment of horses, because he knows how they ought to be treated. But he will see nothing but what is normal in a man riding on a horse. He will not listen to the great modern philosopher who explains to him that the horse ought to be riding on the man. He will not pursue the pessimist of fancy of Swift, and say that men must be despised as monkeys and worshipped horses as gods. And horse and man together, making an image that is to him human and civilized, it will be easy, as it were, to lift horse and man together into something heroic or symbolical, like a vision of St. George in the clouds. The fable of the winged horse will not be wholly unnatural to him, and he will know why Ariosto sent many a Christian hero into such an airy saddle and made him the rider of the sky. For the horse has really been lifted up along with the man in the wildest fashion in every word we use when we speak chivalry. The very name of the horse has been given to the highest mood and moment of the man, so that we might almost say that the handsomest compliment to a man is to call him a horse. I find that very thought-provoking, that really man and horse are so inextricably linked. A lot of people say that a dog is man's best friend, but that completely disregards the history of the horse and the man. The horse has been what has provided the means of travel and work and even friendship for man for centuries and millennia. So our connection with horses is very, very close, even if in this age of the automobile. Now I'll stop briefly to take a little sip of the tea and see how it is. Has a lot of cinnamon flavor to it. It's very good. It's nice and refreshing. I like a good tea that does that. Alright, let's continue. But if a man has got into a mood in which he is not able to feel this sort of wonder that is towards the horse, then his cure must begin right at the other end. We must now suppose that he has drifted into a dull mood, in which somebody sitting on a horse means no more than somebody sitting on a chair. The wonder of which Wyndham spoke, the beauty that made the thing seem an equestrian statue, the meaning of the more chivalric horseman, may have become to him merely a convention and a bore. Perhaps they have been merely a fashion. Perhaps they have gone out of fashion. Perhaps they have been talked about too much or talked about in the wrong way. I like how he puts that. Often it's not the thing that is talked about, but it's the way you talk about things. In this case, it's the horse. Perhaps it was then difficult to care for horses without the horrible risk of being horsey. Anyhow, he has got into a condition when he cares no more for a horse than for a towel horse. His grandfather's charge at Balaclava seems to him as dull and dusty as the album containing such family portraits. Such a person has not really become enlightened about the album. On the contrary, he has only become blind with the dust. But when he has reached that degree of blindness, he will not be able to look at a horse or a horseman at all until he has seen the whole thing as a thing entirely unfamiliar and almost unearthly. Out of some dark forest, under some ancient dawn, there must come towards us, with lumbering yet dancing motions, one of the very queerest of the prehistoric creatures. We must see for the first time the strangely small head set on a neck not only longer but thicker than itself, as the face of a gargoyle is thrust out upon a gutter spout, the one disproportionate crest of hair running along the ridge of that heavy neck like a beard in the wrong place, the feet, each of like a solid club of horn, alone amid the feet of so many cattle, so that the true fear is to be found in showing not the cloven, but the uncloven hoof. Nor is it mere verbal fancy to see him thus as a unique monster, for in a sense a monster means what is unique, and he is really unique. But the point is that when we thus see him as the first man saw him, we begin once more to have some imaginative sense of what it meant when the first man rode him. In such a dream he may seem ugly, but he does not seem unimpressive, and certainly that two-legged dwarf who could get on top of him will not seem unimpressive either. By a longer and more erratic road we shall come back to the same marvel of the man and the horse, and the marvel will be, if possible, even more marvelous. We shall have again a glimpse of St. George, the most glorious because St. George is not riding on the horse, but rather riding on the dragon. In this example, which I have taken merely because it is an example, it will be noted that I do not say that the nightmare seen by the first man of the forest is either more true or more wonderful than the normal mare of the stable seen by the civilized person who can appreciate what is normal. Of the two extremes, I think on the whole that the traditional grasp of truth is the better, but I say that the truth is found at one or other of the two extremes, and is lost in the intermediate condition of mere fatigue and forgetfulness of tradition. In other words, I say it is better to see a horse as a monster than to see it only as a slow substitute for a motor car. If we have got into that state of mind about a horse as something stale, it is far better to be frightened of a horse because it is a good deal too fresh. Now, as it is with the monster that is called a horse, so it is with the monster that is called a man. Of course, the best condition of all, in my opinion, is always to have regarded man as he is regarded in my philosophy. He who holds the Christian and Catholic view of human nature will feel certain that it is a universal and therefore sane view, and will be satisfied. But if he has lost the sane vision, he can only get it back by something very like a mad vision, that is, by seeing man as a strange animal and realizing how strange an animal he is. But just as seeing the horse as a prehistoric prodigy ultimately led back to, and not away from, an admiration for the mastery of man, so the really detached consideration of the curious career of man will lead back to, and not away from, the ancient faith in the dark designs of God. In other words, it is exactly when we do see how queer the quadruped is, that we praise the man who mounts him, and exactly when we do see how queer the biped is, that we praise the providence that made him. I find that just utterly brilliant, that to lose, or to rather gain a normalcy, or to gain a normalcy in the sense that something becomes so mundane that you don't think of how strange it is anymore, that is to lose sight of the vision of life itself. I remember when I was younger, I went into this practice that is often introduced to youngsters, that if you say a word enough times, it almost becomes as if it's not even a word to you. I remember saying the word goat over and over again. Goat, goat, goat. And it came to the point where I thought to myself as a child, is goat even a word anymore? What even is a goat? I think it's the same with what Chesterton here is saying with the horse. You use an automobile, or rather, he's talking about the horse itself as something more majestic than the automobile in this time when horses were still used widely. That you use a horse so much that it becomes something mundane to you. It loses the magic of when man first saw the horse. It becomes something normal to you in a negative kind of way. And that, in and of itself, it makes us lose value and mystery of ourselves, that mysterious aspect that we think of ourselves. If we look at a thing and consider it mundane, it's just a short hop skip away from viewing ourselves as mundane. And if we view ourselves as mundane, then God is nothing more than a mere abstract to us. So I think that's brilliant. He later talks about, in a later chapter, the birth of civilization, antiquity in civilization, and he brings up If you're familiar with the Iliad, the story of Troy, how Achilles of the Greeks went to go do battle with Hector of Troy. Now, this is another very good passage that I would like to pull from and read to you now. I'll just take another sip of tea real quick. It still has a light hint to it. It's maybe it's something wrong with how I'm infusing it, but if any of you are avid tea drinkers, please feel free to give me your recommendations for how I should maybe make this stronger if that's possible. But I can definitely taste it. It's a good cinnamon taste. All right, let's continue. Somewhere along the Ionian coast opposite Crete and the islands was a town of some sort, probably of the sort that we should call a village or a hamlet with a wall. It was called Ilion, but it came to be called Troy, and the name will never perish from the earth. A poet who may have been a beggar and a ballad monger, who may have been unable to read and write, and was described by tradition as blind, composed a poem about the Greeks going to war with this town to recover the most beautiful woman in the world. Of course, he's speaking about Homer. That the most beautiful woman in the world lived in this one little town sounds like a legend. That the most beautiful poem in the world was written by somebody who knew nothing of larger towns than such a little town is a historical fact. It is said that the poem came at the end of the period, that the primitive culture brought it forth in its decay, in which case one would like to have seen that culture in its prime. But anyhow, it is true that this, which is our first poem, might very well be our last poem too. It might well be the last word as well as the first word spoken by man about his mortal lot, as seen by merely mortal vision. If the world becomes pagan and perishes, the last man left alive would do well to quote the Iliad and die. But in this one great human revelation of antiquity, there is another element of great historical importance, which has hardly, I think, been given its proper place in history. The poet has so conceived the poem that his sympathies apparently, and those of his reader certainly, are on the side of the vanquished rather than of the victor. And this is a sentiment which increases in the poetical tradition, even as the poetical origin itself recedes. Achilles had some status as a sort of demigod in pagan times, but he disappears altogether in later times. But Hector grows greater as the ages pass, and it is his name that is the name of a knight of the Round Table, and his sword that legend puts into the hand of Roland, laying about him with the weapon of the defeated Hector in the last ruin and splendor of his own defeat. The name anticipates all the defeats through which our race and religion were to pass. That survival of 100 defeats, that is its triumph. The tale of the end of Troy shall have no ending, for it is lifted up forever into living echoes, immortal as our hopelessness and our hope. Troy standing was a small thing that may have stood nameless for ages, but Troy falling has been caught up in a flame and suspended in an immortal instant of annihilation. And because it was destroyed with fire, the fire shall never be destroyed. And as with the city, so with the hero, traced in archaic lines in that primeval twilight, is found the first figure of the knight. There is a prophetic coincidence in his title. We have spoken of the word chivalry, and how it seems to mingle the horseman with the horse. It is almost anticipated ages before in the thunder of the Homeric hexameter, and that long leaping word with which the Iliad ends. It is that very unity for which we can find no name, but the holy centaur of chivalry. And there are other reasons for giving, in this glimpse of antiquity, the flame upon the sacred town. The sanctity of such towns ran like a fire round the coasts of the islands of the northern Mediterranean. The high-fenced hamlet for which heroes died. From the smallness of the city came the greatness of the citizen. Hellas with her 100 statues produced nothing statelier than the walking statue, the ideal of the self-commanding man. Hellas of the 100 statues was one legend and literature, and all that labyrinth of little walled nations resounding with the lament of Troy. A later legend, an afterthought but not an accident, said that stragglers from Troy founded a republic on the Italian shore. It was true in spirit that republican virtue had such a root, the mystery of honor, that was not born of Babylon or the Egyptian pride, there shone like the shield of Hector, defying Asia and Africa, till the light of a new day was loosened with the rushing of the eagles and the coming of the name that came like a thunderclap when the world woke to Rome. That's just a brilliant command of English right there. The use of alliteration and all the similar sounding words, and how he flows all of them together in such prose is just amazing to read. But I really have taken away from this, and I'll just offer you my thoughts briefly, that, of course, speaking about the introduction, that man and the horse are linked together. The horse made the knight just as much as the man did. His mastery of the horse, and even the fact that the horse let him master him, is something to be commended and looked at with majesty. Even the knight, it's something to be looked at with majesty in this sense that he's talking about Troy, and that even though Achilles was the victor over Hector, you might even view this as a proto medieval, type of story when it comes to two dueling knights. That time has done justice to Hector, who was defeated, rather than Achilles. So I think that speaks to something, that he's saying that Troy gained its fame not from its height of power, but from its fall to the Greeks. So, and even going forward to consider how it's said that Rome was founded by those who were fleeing the destruction of Troy, and then Rome came to be the great empire and republic, and how even the Catholic Church has arisen out of the ashes of the Roman Empire, establishing Rome as its own. I can see where Chesterton is going with this. Now, when it comes to the knight, I think it's not just a medieval figure, but something that's even laid down in primeval times. Like, he talks about the first man riding the horse, but even further back than that, it's something to do with the nature of God himself. The heroic, despite, those who may seek to destroy you. Of course, God the Father being beyond all that, but he's sending his Son, Jesus Christ, to be destroyed by his own will, of course, but put through torment and rejection and shame by the world. That he was defeated. That if you connect this with Christ, the message of Christ would mean nothing if he was not defeated, quote, quote. Of course, he wasn't really defeated. He defeated death itself, but for many of his disciples it appeared as though he had been defeated. Now, if he had simply been defeated as well, then the message of Christ would mean little to us, but it's the fact that he not only came and preached and did miracles and was rest for the weary, but that he was put to death on a cross, and that he defeated death and rose again. That is how maybe the knight is instilled, the chivalric value is instilled into Christ. That how he says in John, what greater love is there than that a brother should lay down his life for his own brothers? And that not only Christ laid down his life, but he proved himself to be beyond all death and destruction by his conquering of death and destruction, by his conquering of Satan, his slaying of chaos and the dragon. So, thank you for joining me for Tuesday afternoon tea. If you've stuck around, I hope you are encouraged to pick up The Everlasting Man by G.K. Chesterton. It has been a brilliant read so far. I'm far from done with it, and I'll offer many more anecdotes as we progress in this video series. Thank you.